I'm Lauren Mitchell, 34. I just finalized a $120,000 loan agreement for my own father with 22% annual interest plus processing fees and strict guarantees. I looked into the eyes of the man who told me I'd never be anything without his family and signed the documents without my hands shaking. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I just maintained my professional composure while he called the terms ridiculous and told me I was ungrateful. The expression on his face when I responded, "Business is business, Dad. You taught me that, remember?" was worth every second of the underestimation I endured in that family, 3 years working at the company and a lifetime growing up under that family dynamic. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by the people who should appreciate you most. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, Mitchell Construction was more than a family business, it was our identity. My father, Richard Mitchell, started it as a small operation that grew profitable during the early 2000s housing boom. Every dinner conversation revolved around contracts, clients, and growth strategies. I was a curious child. Dad used to take me to construction sites when I was little. I'd wear a too big hard hat and ask endless questions about blueprints and materials. "You've got a good eye for business, Lauren," he'd say back then, ruffling my hair. Those memories make what happened later hurt even more. As a teenager, I watched as my younger brother Tyler was groomed to take over someday. He was only 2 years younger, but the difference in how we were treated might as well have been decades. "Tyler, come look at these foundation plans." "Tyler, meet our new supplier." "Tyler, you'll run this company someday." I wasn't included in those conversations anymore. When I graduated high school with honors and announced I wanted to study business administration, Dad seemed pleased. I thought maybe I was working my way back into his vision for the company's future. 4 years later, I graduated at the top of my class. My thesis on family business succession planning won departmental recognition. I thought surely now Dad would see my potential. "We always need good administrative support," was all he said at my graduation dinner. Still, I joined the family business. What choice did I have? It was all I'd ever known, all I'd ever wanted to be part of. I told myself I'd prove my worth through hard work and dedication. They put me at the front desk. My starting salary was $32,000, barely enough to afford a tiny apartment 20 minutes from the office. Tyler started at $65,000 in management training, despite barely finishing high school. I swallowed my pride. I came in early, stayed late. I reorganized the filing system, computerized the accounting processes, and started handling client communications because I was good with people. Within a year, I was effectively running the office operations. Within 2, I was managing our smaller client relationships when the men were too busy with important meetings, which often involved golf courses and expensive lunches. My mother, Ellen, occasionally tried to advocate for me. "Richard, Lauren deserves a raise with all the extra responsibility she's taken on," she'd say. "She's getting valuable experience," Dad would respond dismissively. "Besides, she's family. We all make sacrifices for family." What he meant was that I should make sacrifices for the family. By my 3rd year, I was working 60-hour weeks. I'd created systems that increased our efficiency by 22%. I'd personally secured 3 new major clients through careful relationship building. I'd saved the company $43,000 by renegotiating vendor contracts. Tyler took credit for all of it in family meetings. I'd sit there, silent, as my father beamed at my brother. "That's my boy, a natural businessman." One evening after a particularly frustrating day, Mom found me crying in my car in the parking lot. "Honey, why do you stay?" she asked, her voice gentle but her eyes knowing. I wiped my tears, straightened my back, and said the words I'd been telling myself for years. "Because I'm a Mitchell, and someday they'll see my value." I didn't know then that someday would come, but not in the way I expected. I didn't know that in less than a week, everything would change. I didn't know that the next family meeting would be the one where I finally found my voice and my way out. 3 days later, I arrived at the office to find Tyler sitting at my desk, talking animatedly with a bank representative. My father stood beside them, proudly clasping my brother's shoulder. They barely glanced up when I entered. "Morning, Lauren," my dad said absently. "We need coffee for our meeting. The good stuff, not the break room garbage." I stood frozen in the doorway. On the desk, my desk lay a thick document labeled Mitchell Construction Expansion Plan. The title page looked oddly familiar. "Is there something else?" Dad asked when I didn't immediately move to get their coffee. "What's the meeting about?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Tyler's presenting his expansion plan, Dad said proudly. He's been working on it for months. Brilliant idea to get into construction financing. Construction financing. The exact proposal I'd spent 3 months researching and developing, the one Dad had dismissed as interesting before passing it to Tyler to extract something useful. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling I felt inside. I'll get that coffee. In the break room, I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I filled the carafe, arranged cookies on a plate, and returned to serve the men who were stealing my ideas and my future. As I set down the tray, I caught a glimpse of the document. It wasn't just similar to mine, it was identical. Page after page of my research, my financial projections, my risk assessments. Only the name had changed. Lauren, Tyler said magnanimously, maybe you could take notes for us, since you're good at that sort of thing? Dad laughed. That's why we keep her around. Always organized, our Lauren. The bank representative looked uncomfortable. He glanced between us, perhaps sensing the tension. Actually, I said quietly, I have some filing to catch up on. I'm sure Tyler can handle the presentation himself, since he created it all. I spent the rest of the morning in a fog, mechanically sorting papers while my mind raced. This wasn't the first time my contributions had been minimized, but it was the first time they'd been so blatantly stolen. At lunch, Melissa from accounting slid into the seat across from me in the empty break room. That was your proposal, wasn't it? She asked without preamble. I looked up, surprised by her directness. What makes you say that? I saw your draft 2 months ago when you asked me to review the financial projections, she said. It has your fingerprints all over it, especially the risk assessment matrix. Tyler couldn't create something that sophisticated if his life depended on it. For the first time that day, I felt tears threatening. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen. It doesn't matter, I said, pushing my untouched sandwich away. Dad will never see me as anything more than office support. Melissa leaned forward. So what are you going to do about it? The question caught me off guard. Do about it? What could I possibly do? Nothing, I said automatically. They're family. And that makes it okay for them to treat you like this? Her words hung in the air between us. I'd been so focused on proving myself worthy of the Mitchell name that I'd never considered whether the Mitchell name was worthy of me. That afternoon, I returned to my desk to find a letter that had been delivered to the office. It was from the State University, a response to the MBA application I'd submitted in secret 2 months earlier, during a moment of rare rebellion. I slipped it into my purse without opening it, afraid someone might see it and report back to my father. This small act of independence needed protection. That night in my tiny apartment, I stared at the unopened letter for hours. Finally, at 11:43 p.m., I tore it open. Dear Ms. Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance to our MBA program with a 60% scholarship. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. A way out. A path forward. A future that didn't depend on my father's approval or my brother's generosity. But could I really leave? After all these years of trying to belong? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father wants to discuss expanding your responsibilities tomorrow. He was impressed by how you handled the Johnson account. Hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe things were changing. Maybe they finally saw my value. I fell asleep clutching that fragile hope, unaware that tomorrow would shatter it completely. The attempt at recognition. The next morning, I dressed with extra care my best blazer, the pearl earrings Mom had given me for graduation. Today might be the day everything changed. Dad called me into his office at 10 a.m. Tyler was already there, lounging in the visitor chair like he owned the place. Maybe someday he would. Lauren, sit down, Dad said, gesturing to the other chair. His tone was businesslike but not unkind. We've been talking about your role here. My heart quickened. I've actually been thinking about that too. I have some ideas. Great, because we've made a decision. Dad interrupted. The construction financing program is moving forward. Tyler will be heading it up. I glanced at my brother, who smirked slightly. And, Dad continued, we'll need someone to handle the increased administrative load. That's where you come in. I waited for more. There had to be more. We're promoting you to office manager, Dad announced, like he was offering me the world. $2 raise, plus you'll get your own office. Well, the storage room once we clear it out. Office manager, I repeated flatly. It's a big responsibility, Tyler chimed in. You'll be supporting the entire financing division. Supporting. Always supporting, never leading. What about my ideas for client acquisition? The new risk assessment protocols I developed? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too high, too desperate. Dad waved his hand dismissively. Tyler will be implementing those as part of the overall program. But they were my... Lauren? Dad cut in sharply. This is a family business. Individual credit doesn't matter. What matters is that Mitchell Construction succeeds. I looked between them, my father's expectant face, my brother's smug smile, and something inside me finally broke. When you say family business, I said slowly, what you really mean is Tyler's business, don't you? Dad's expression hardened. That's not fair. We're offering you a promotion. You're offering me a title change and $2 more an hour to keep doing what I've always done, make Tyler look good. Now, Lauren, Dad began, his face reddening. No. The word came out louder than I intended. No, I won't do it anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out the university acceptance letter, sliding it across the desk. I've been accepted to the MBA program, with a scholarship. Dad barely glanced at it. An MBA? What for? You already have a position here. A position, not a future. The words tumbled out now, years of suppressed feelings finding their voice. I have a business degree. I've brought in new clients. I created the entire financing proposal that Tyler is now taking credit for. What more do I need to do to be taken seriously in this family? Tyler stood up, his face flushed. You're being dramatic. Just because you filed some paperwork doesn't mean I didn't file some paperwork. I built the entire model. I ran the numbers. I identified the market opportunity. You just put your name on it. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? Drop a in the comments if you know exactly how this feels. Dad slammed his hand on the desk. That's enough. Lauren, you're being ungrateful. Everything we've done has been for this family's benefit. No, I said, standing up, suddenly calm. Everything you've done has been for Tyler's benefit. I was just convenient free labor. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket, the resignation letter I'd drafted late last night just in case. 2 weeks' notice, I said, placing it on the desk. I start classes next month. Dad didn't touch the letter. You're making a mistake. What do you think you'll accomplish out there on your own? This business is your inheritance, your security. I looked him straight in the eyes. Is it? Or is it just Tyler's? You're a woman in construction, Lauren, he said, as if explaining something to a child. It's different. Clients respect Tyler in ways they never will you. I'm being realistic. Then I'll find an industry where my gender isn't a liability in your eyes. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. You walk out that door, don't expect to come crawling back when you fail. You'll be nothing without us. Lauren, nothing. I paused in the doorway, my back still to them, and spoke the words that would change everything. I guess we'll find out. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I documented everything, trained my replacement, a nervous 19-year-old with no experience, and endured the awkward silences whenever I entered a room. Dad barely spoke to me. Tyler made a point of loudly discussing his financing program whenever I was within earshot. Mom tried to mediate, but even she wouldn't directly challenge Dad's decisions. He just wants what's best for everyone, she said one evening when she called me at home. Maybe this MBA will help you find your place in the company when you're done. Mom, I said gently, I'm not coming back. Her silence told me she didn't believe me. None of them did. They were so certain I'd fail that they couldn't imagine any other outcome. On my last day, Dad called me into his office. I don't know what I expected. An apology? A recognition of my contributions? Some fatherly advice? Instead, he slid a non-disclosure agreement across the desk. Legal says we need this given your access to client information. I stared at the document, noting the punitive clauses and broad restrictions. It would essentially prevent me from working in any related field within a 200-mile radius. I'm not signing this, I said, pushing it back. It's standard procedure. No, it's not. You never made any other employee sign something like this. Dad's jaw tightened. Other employees aren't family. Other employees don't have your knowledge of our operations. Knowledge I gained while working for poverty wages, I reminded him. Knowledge that apparently wasn't valuable enough for you to listen to my ideas. Lauren, don't be difficult. Just sign it. I stood up. No, I've already consulted with a lawyer. You can't legally enforce this, especially not after the fact. His eyebrows shot up. You spoke to a lawyer? Behind my back? I spoke to a lawyer about my rights. As I should have years ago. Dad's face darkened. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? With threats? It's not a threat. It's me finally standing up for myself. He tossed the pen down. Fine. Leave. Go play businesswoman with your fancy MBA. But remember what I said, you'll be nothing without the Mitchell name behind you. Nothing. I should have been hurt. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Thank you for making this easier, Dad. As I turned to leave, he called after me. You'll be back. The real world isn't as forgiving as family. I closed the door without responding and walked to my desk for the last time. Melissa was waiting there with a small gift bag. You might need this, she said, handing it to me. Inside was a leather portfolio embossed with my initials, not the Mitchell family crest that adorned everything in the office, but just LM, mine alone. For your new beginning, she whispered, quickly hugging me before anyone could see. I packed my few personal items into a box. Before leaving, I made one final decision. I had already sent the company documents I'd created to my personal email as proof of my work, but now I gathered copies of my original risk assessment protocols, client acquisition strategies, and financial projections documents that represented hundreds of hours of my work. Not to use unethically, but as templates for my future career and proof of my capabilities. I'll be keeping these, I told Melissa quietly. They're my intellectual property. She nodded. Smart. You created them after all. Who knows when they might be useful again? As I walked out, some employees nodded goodbye. Others avoided eye contact, afraid of being associated with the family outcast. Mom met me in the parking lot, her eyes red-rimmed. He doesn't mean what he says when he's angry, she offered weakly. Yes, Mom, he does. I hugged her tightly. This isn't goodbye, just goodbye to working here. She pressed her car keys into my hand. Take my car until you can afford your own. I can use the company vehicle. Dad won't like that. She straightened her shoulders. Let me worry about your father. It was the first time I'd seen her stand up to him, even indirectly. Maybe my leaving would change more than just my life. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The Mitchell construction sign loomed large over the building. For my entire life, that name had defined me, my worth, my place, my future. Now I had to define myself. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and typed 3 words that would become my mantra for the next 3 years. Watch me succeed. My first day of MBA orientation was terrifying. Most students were younger, fresh from undergraduate programs. Others were seasoned professionals sponsored by their employers. I was neither just a 27-year-old woman with a chip on her shoulder and something to prove. Financial management emphasis? The academic advisor raised her eyebrows as she reviewed my registration. That's our most demanding track. Most students have industry experience. I have experience, I said firmly, just not the conventional kind. The workload was brutal. I attended classes during the day and worked nights at a local bank as a teller, the only position I could find without recent references. My father had made sure of that. I later learned he'd told our industry contacts that I'd left on difficult terms. My tiny studio apartment was all I could afford on my reduced income. Some nights I ate ramen for dinner so I could pay for textbooks. I sold my furniture piece by piece when money got tight, first the coffee table, then the bookshelf, finally the bed frame, sleeping on just a mattress on the floor. Dad's words echoed in my darkest moments. You'll be nothing without us. I used them as fuel, studying until my eyes burned, taking on extra projects, seeking out professors during office hours to absorb everything they could teach me. 3 months in, Professor Winters pulled me aside after her corporate finance lecture. Mitchell, she said, eyeing me curiously. Any relation to Mitchell Construction? My stomach dropped. Had my father's influence reached even here? Yes, I admitted. They're my family. Interesting. She tapped her pen against her notepad. Your analysis of the Harrington case was exceptional. You identified factors the other students missed. Thank you, I said, surprised by the praise. You have an unusual perspective. Like you've seen the practical side, not just the theoretical. I hesitated before responding. I worked in a family business for 3 years. I saw how financial decisions really get made when textbook approaches meet human emotions. She nodded thoughtfully. We're launching a research project on family business succession. Could use someone with your insight. It's unpaid, but could lead to connections. I'm interested, I said immediately. It means extra hours, on top of your coursework and your job. I'm not afraid of hard work, Professor. She studied me for a moment. No, I don't think you are. Email me your schedule. We'll make it work. That research position changed everything. I met Jane Winters, Professor Winters' sister, and a respected finance executive who was establishing a new fund for underserved business sectors. I worked weekends and any spare hours helping with their research, absorbing everything about investment evaluation and risk assessment. Often late at night, I would revisit the documents I'd brought from Mitchell Construction, refining and improving my models based on what I was learning. These weren't just relics of my past, they were becoming the foundation for my future methodology. 6 months into my MBA program, Jane offered me a part-time paid internship. The salary was modest, but it meant I could quit the bank teller job for something relevant to my career goals. You have good instincts, Jane told me after I'd correctly identified a promising investment opportunity the other analysts had overlooked. You see value where others see only risk. For the first time since leaving Mitchell Construction, I felt my confidence growing, not because someone else validated me, but because I was proving my worth through results, not family connections. I still kept tabs on the family business through Melissa, who had become a true friend. The construction financing program was struggling under Tyler's leadership. He'd implemented it without the careful risk controls I designed, resulting in several bad loans that were straining the company's resources. Your dad won't admit it, Melissa texted one night, but they needed your analytical skills more than they knew. Part of me felt vindicated. A smaller, more petty part felt satisfied, but mostly I felt free. Their success or failure no longer defined me. In my second semester, I met Nathan Reynolds in my data analytics class. He was brilliant with numbers and painfully shy. We became study partners, then friends. He helped me strengthen the quantitative side of my analyses, while I helped him communicate his insights more effectively. By the end of my first year, I'd earned a 3.9 GPA, a paid position with Jane's investment firm, and something money couldn't buy: belief in myself. One evening, as I was leaving campus after a late study session, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Lauren," she said, her voice tight. "Your father's had a minor heart attack. Drop in the comments if you've ever had to balance family obligations with personal growth." I rushed to the hospital, my mind racing. Despite everything, he was still my father. When I arrived, Mom and Tyler were already there. Dad looked smaller somehow, diminished against the white hospital sheets. "Lauren," he said, his voice raspy. "You came." Was he surprised? Did he think I'd abandoned the family completely? "Of course I came," I said, standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed. The doctor said it was a warning, not severe, but serious enough to require lifestyle changes. Less stress, better diet, regular exercise. "I can't slow down," Dad protested. "The business needs me. The business needs you alive," Mom countered with uncharacteristic firmness. I stayed for an hour, making appropriate conversation. As I was leaving, Tyler followed me into the hallway. "How's the MBA?" he asked, his tone suggesting he expected me to have failed by now. "It's going well," I said simply. "I'm working with an investment firm part-time." "Investment?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Like stocks and stuff?" "Business financing. Specifically, we help companies that traditional banks undervalue." Something flashed across his face, recognition, perhaps, that I was doing exactly what I'd proposed for Mitchell Construction, just for someone else. "That's good," he said, sounding uncertain. Dad will be pleased you found something." I almost laughed. I doubt that's his primary concern right now. "Yeah, well." Tyler shuffled his feet. "Things haven't been great at the company. The financing program has some challenges." Was he actually asking for my help? After everything? "I hope you figure it out," I said neutrally. "I need to get back to campus. I have an early class tomorrow." As I walked away, I heard him call after me. "He talks about you, wonders how you're doing." I didn't turn around. I couldn't let them pull me back into their orbit. Not when I was finally finding my own path. The next 2 years passed in a blur of classes, case studies, and hands-on experience at Jane's firm. I graduated with my MBA at the top of my class, with a specialization in financial analysis and investment management. Jane immediately offered me a full-time position as a junior analyst. "You've got something special, Lauren," she told me. "You understand numbers, but you also understand people. That's rare in this business." During this time, Melissa and I remained close. She had started taking night classes toward her CPA certification, inspired partly by my example. "If you can reinvent yourself, so can I," she told me over coffee one weekend. "I've always loved accounting, but never thought I could pursue it seriously until I saw you take the leap." 3 months into my new role, I was assigned my first solo client evaluation, a family-owned manufacturing business, seeking capital for expansion. The company had been rejected by traditional banks despite strong fundamentals because of concerns about management transition issues. I recognized the pattern immediately. The founder's son had been installed as president despite lacking experience, while his more qualified daughter was relegated to administrative roles. During my site visit, I spoke with both siblings. The daughter clearly understood the business on a deeper level, but deferred to her brother in meetings. I pulled her aside afterward. "You created the expansion plan, didn't you?" I asked directly. She looked startled, then wary. Why would you say that? Because I recognize the situation, I said. I've lived it. Something in my tone must have convinced her. She admitted to developing the entire strategy while her brother took the credit. In my recommendation to Jane, I proposed an unusual condition. The daughter should be named COO with clear authority over the expansion project as a requirement for our investment. That's unorthodox, Jane said, reviewing my report. We don't typically dictate management structure. This isn't about dictating structure, I explained. It's about recognizing and leveraging their strongest asset, her expertise. The company will be more likely to succeed with her in a leadership role, which makes our investment safer. Jane studied me for a long moment. This is personal for you. It informs my analysis, I acknowledged. But the numbers support my recommendation. To my surprise, Jane approved my proposal. Even more surprisingly, the family accepted our terms. 6 months later, their expansion was exceeding projections, and the daughter was thriving in her executive role. That success led to more. I developed a reputation for understanding family business dynamics and identifying hidden potential where others saw only risk. My progression at the firm was steady junior analyst for 18 months, then analyst for 2 years, followed by senior analyst. Each promotion came with increased responsibility and validation of my approach. Nathan joined our firm after completing his PhD in financial analytics, bringing his computational expertise to complement my qualitative approach. Together, we developed a proprietary assessment model that helped identify promising investment opportunities among businesses traditional lenders overlooked. The foundation of this model? The very risk assessment protocols I had created at Mitchell Construction, now refined and expanded through years of academic study and practical application. Those documents I had saved weren't just mementos of a painful past, they had become the seeds of my professional innovation. I rarely thought about Mitchell Construction anymore. Mom still called regularly, but we kept our conversations focused on personal matters, not business. I sent birthday and Christmas cards to Dad and Tyler, but declined invitations to family business functions. 5 years after completing my MBA at age 34, Jane called me into her office. I'm restructuring the firm, she announced, creating specialized divisions with more autonomy. I want you to head the family business transition group as a separate entity under our umbrella. Your own office, your own team, your name on the door. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. You've earned this, Lauren, she said. You've built something valuable. Now build it bigger. 2 months later, I signed the paperwork establishing Mitchell Financial Partners as a subsidiary of Winters Investment Group, not Mitchell Construction. Not my father's name, mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. 7 years after being told I'd be nothing without them, I had built something meaningful, substantial, and entirely my own. I never expected what happened next. 3 weeks after launching Mitchell Financial Partners, my assistant Hannah knocked on my office door. There's a call for you online too, she said, looking uncomfortable. It's a Richard Mitchell from Mitchell Construction. He says he's your father. My stomach tightened. Did he say what it's about? He mentioned needing to discuss a business matter urgently. I stared at the blinking light on my phone. After all these years, what business matter could possibly bring my father to call me? Thank you, Hannah. I'll take it. I picked up the receiver and pressed the button, adopting my professional voice. Lauren Mitchell speaking. Lauren. My father's voice sounded older, strained. I need to meet with you. No greeting. No congratulations on my new position. Typical. I'm quite busy with the new division, I replied evenly. What's this regarding? It's not something to discuss over the phone. Can you make time tomorrow? I'll come to your office. The direct request surprised me. Dad never came to others, they came to him. I have a 30-minute window at 2 p.m., I said, checking my calendar. Will that suffice? It will, thank you. He paused. Your mother says congratulations, by the way, on your new position. Thank her for me, I responded, noticing he couldn't bring himself to offer his own congratulations. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, trying to process what had just happened. Why would my father suddenly reach out after 7 years of minimal contact? What urgent business matter could possibly involve both of us? I called Melissa, who still worked at Mitchell Construction, now as their assistant controller while completing her CPA studies. Is everything okay there? I asked after exchanging pleasantries. My father just called wanting to meet. Her hesitation told me everything. Lauren, it's not my place to say, but things aren't great. The financing division has been struggling for years. They've had some significant losses recently. How significant? I've said too much already, she replied carefully. But you should hear what your father has to say. The next day, I arrived at the office early, reviewing our lending criteria and preparing myself emotionally for whatever was coming. At 2:10 p.m., Dad was always exactly 10 minutes late, a power move Hannah showed him in. He looked older than I remembered. His hair had gone completely gray, and he'd lost weight, but he still carried himself with the same authoritative posture, dressed in his customary navy suit with the Mitchell construction pin on his lapel. "Lauren." He nodded, taking in my office, the view of the city, the awards on the wall, the sleek modern furniture that projected success and stability. "Dad," I replied, gesturing to the visitor's chair. "Please sit." He settled himself, glancing around again. "Nice place. Winters has done well by you." "I've done well by Winters," I corrected gently. "What can I help you with today?" He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll come straight to the point. Mitchell Construction is facing some financial challenges. We need a cash infusion to meet current obligations while we reorganize." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. Have you approached your usual lenders?" "We've exhausted those options," he admitted. "Our debt-to-income ratio is problematic at the moment." Translation: they were overextended and banks considered them too risky. "And what exactly are you proposing?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We need a loan. $120,000 would cover immediate needs until we can right the ship. The exact amount of my college tuition and expenses. The money I'd needed when he'd told me I'd be nothing without them." The irony wasn't subtle. "I see," I said carefully. "You're aware that Mitchell Financial Partners specializes in business transition financing, not emergency funding." "Yes, but—" he shifted in his seat. "I thought given our connection, you might make an exception." "Our connection," I repeated. "You mean our family relationship?" "Exactly. Family helps family." I allowed myself a moment to absorb the audacity of his request. After years of minimizing my contributions, taking credit for my ideas, and finally dismissing me entirely, he now wanted to leverage our connection when it benefited him. "Tell me about these financial challenges," I said, reaching for a notepad. "When did they begin?" Dad looked relieved that I was engaging with his request. For the next 20 minutes, he outlined the company's situation, how the construction financing program had expanded too quickly, how several large loans had defaulted, how they'd used company reserves to cover losses. Every problem stemmed from the exact issues my original proposal had safeguards against the safeguards Tyler had removed when he put his name on my work. "And Tyler's role in all this?" I asked. Dad hesitated. "He's focusing on operations now. The financial side wasn't his strength." A diplomatic way of saying my brother had failed at implementing my ideas. "I'll need to see financial statements for the past 3 years, I said, making notes. "Full disclosure of all outstanding debts, client contracts, and asset valuations. Our committee will need to perform due diligence." "Committee?" Dad frowned. "I thought you would handle this personally." "That would be a conflict of interest," I explained. "All loan applications go through our evaluation process. No exceptions." "But surely in this case, no exceptions," I repeated firmly. "Not even for family. Especially not for family." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded stiffly. "When can we expect an answer?" "Once we have all documentation. The review typically takes 5 to 7 business days. I'll recuse myself from the final decision, of course." As he stood to leave, he hesitated. "Your mother would love to see you. It's been a while." "Tell her I'll call this weekend," I promised. "And Dad? The committee will evaluate your application fairly. But prepare yourself if approved. The terms may be strict, given the risk factors." He nodded, a flash of the old pride crossing his face. I wouldn't expect special treatment. But that was exactly what he had expected. He just hadn't anticipated being on the requesting end. After he left, I sat quietly in my office, processing what had just happened. The universe had handed me the perfect opportunity for petty revenge, served on a silver platter. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. I would ensure the evaluation was fair, the terms appropriate for the risk level, and the decision based on sound business principles, just as I had always wanted for myself. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. The confrontation. 3 days later, I received the complete financial package from Mitchell Construction. The situation was worse than my father had indicated. They weren't just experiencing temporary challenges, they were on the brink of insolvency. Bad loans had piled up, credit lines were maxed out, vendor payments were consistently late. 3 banks had already declined their loan applications, citing poor management and excessive risk. I immediately contacted our legal team to discuss how to handle the obvious conflict of interest. Their advice was clear and comprehensive. I could oversee the initial analysis but should recuse myself from the final decision. Additionally, we needed to document every step of the process meticulously, have the ethics committee review the terms, and ensure an independent third-party validator confirmed our risk assessment. Following these guidelines, Nathan led the evaluation team, applying our standard metrics without knowing the company's connection to me. His preliminary assessment was blunt. Based on standard criteria, this is a clear rejection, he told me, pointing to their spreadsheet. Debt ratios are alarming, cash flow is inconsistent, and their collateral is already leveraged. I nodded, not surprised. If we were a traditional lender, I'd agree. But we're not. Look beyond the numbers, what do you see? Nathan frowned, reviewing the documents again. Well, their core construction business is still fundamentally sound. It's the financing division that's dragging everything down. If they jettisoned that, restructured management, and focused on their strengths? Exactly, I said. This isn't just a financial problem, it's a structural one. After further analysis, Nathan's team recommended a conditional approval, a high-interest loan with strict oversight requirements, including monthly reviews and management restructuring. The interest rate they proposed was 22% high, but defensible given the risk factors. I stared at that number for a long time. It was technically justifiable, but would be challenging for the company. With a few adjustments to the risk assessment, I could easily justify a lower rate. Was this the moment I'd been unconsciously waiting for? The chance to exact a measure of justice for years of undervaluation? After careful consideration, I made my decision. I wouldn't lower the rate, but I wouldn't raise it either. I would let the committee's recommendations stand strict but defensible. Business, not personal. The ethics committee and third-party validator reviewed the terms and confirmed they were appropriate given the risk factors. Everything was documented and above board. This wasn't about family dynamics, it was sound business practice. I called my father's office the next morning. The loan has been conditionally approved, I informed him. I've emailed the terms for your review. Conditionally? He asked, wariness evident in his voice. Yes, there are specific requirements regarding oversight and management structure. The interest rate reflects the risk assessment 22% annually. His sharp intake of breath was audible. 22%? That's highway robbery. It's actually fairly standard for a high-risk borrower with multiple bank rejections, I explained calmly. You're welcome to seek financing elsewhere if our terms don't suit you. You know we've tried that, he said, his voice tight with anger. Is this your way of getting back at me? At the family? This isn't personal, Dad, I replied evenly. It's business. Your company presents significant risk factors that justify the rate. The documentation supports this assessment, which was conducted by our standard evaluation team. I recused myself from the final decision. I need to discuss this with Tyler, he said abruptly. Of course. The offer remains open until Friday. 2 days later, my assistant informed me that my father and brother were in the lobby requesting a meeting. I hadn't expected Tyler to come along. Send them up, I instructed, straightening my desk and taking a deep breath. They entered my office looking like men heading to their own execution. Dad's expression was grim. Tyler's was a mixture of embarrassment and resentment. Lauren, Dad nodded curtly. Tyler mumbled a greeting, his eyes darting around the office, taking in the evidence of my success. Thank you for coming, I said professionally. Have you had a chance to review the terms? These terms are punitive, Dad said without preamble, dropping the document on my desk. 22% is predatory. It's proportionate to the risk, I corrected. Your company has been rejected by 3 banks, has multiple defaulted loans, and negative cash flow for 2 consecutive quarters. From a purely financial perspective, we shouldn't be approving this loan at all. Then why are you? Tyler asked suddenly. If we're such a bad risk? I met his gaze directly. Because beneath the mismanagement, there's still a viable business. The core construction operation has value. With proper restructuring and financial controls, it can recover. Mismanagement? Dad's face flushed. We've been in business for 30 years. And you've been on the brink of failure for at least 3 of those years, I replied calmly, pointing to their financial statements. The construction financing division has been poorly managed from the start. The risk controls that should have been implemented were ignored. The result is exactly what I predicted would happen in my original proposal, the one Tyler put his name on. Tyler had the grace to look away, his face reddening. That's ancient history, Dad dismissed. We're talking about now. It's directly relevant to now, I insisted. The problems you're facing didn't happen overnight. They're the result of systemic issues that were never addressed. Issues I identified years ago. Dad's jaw tightened. So this is your revenge? Charging us loan shark rates when we're vulnerable? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, Dad, this is business. The rate reflects the risk. The conditions reflect the changes needed for recovery. Nothing more, nothing less. We can't possibly afford these terms, Tyler interjected. The monthly payments alone would cripple us. Then perhaps you should consider the management restructuring option outlined in Section 4, I suggested, flipping to that page. With a qualified CFO implementing proper financial controls, we could reassess the risk factors after 6 months, potentially lowering the rate. Dad scoffed. And who would this CFO report to? You? To the board, which would include a representative from our firm, yes. But day-to-day operations would remain under your control, with appropriate oversight. Tyler leaned forward. So basically, you want to take over? No, I said patiently. I want you to succeed. These measures are designed to help you do that. By charging us 22% interest, Dad muttered bitterly. I closed the folder and looked him directly in the eyes. 7 years ago, you told me I'd be nothing without the Mitchell name. You dismissed my ideas, took credit for my work, and pushed me out because I didn't fit your image of what a Mitchell should be. His eyes widened slightly at my directness. Today, I'm in a position to help save that name, but on terms that reflect reality, not family sentiment. So yes, the rate is high. Yes, the conditions are strict. Because that's what the situation calls for. Not because of our history, but in spite of it. The office fell silent. Dad stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as his overlooked daughter, but as the businesswoman I'd become. We'll take the deal, he said finally, his voice subdued, with the 6-month review option. As I slid the contract across the desk, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just the quiet satisfaction of a professional job done well. I hadn't compromised my principles for revenge, nor had I sacrificed sound business judgment for family ties. Business is business, Dad, I said as he signed the papers. You taught me that. The implementation phase began immediately. As per our agreement, Mitchell Construction would receive the $120,000 loan with specific disbursement schedules tied to milestone achievements. Each month, our consultant would review their operations and financial controls. I assigned Nathan to oversee the project, keeping myself at arm's length to maintain professional boundaries. He provided weekly updates on their progress. They're actually implementing the changes, he reported, sounding surprised after the first month. Your father grumbles, but he's following the restructuring plan. And Tyler? I asked, curious about my brother's role in all this. Interestingly, he seems relieved. Like he's glad someone else is handling the financial side now. He's focusing on client relationships, and operations seems much more comfortable there. This matched what I'd always suspected. Tyler hadn't wanted the financial responsibility. He just wanted the title and status. Perhaps being forced to confront his limitations was actually freeing for him. 3 months into the agreement, Nathan suggested I join him for the quarterly review meeting. They've made significant progress. I think it would be valuable for you to see it firsthand. I hesitated. I'm not sure that's appropriate given my family connection. As the division head, it's entirely appropriate, he countered. Besides, I think it might provide some closure for everyone. Reluctantly, I agreed. We scheduled the meeting at Mitchell Construction's offices rather than my neutral territory seemed best. Walking into the building after 7 years was surreal. Some things remained exactly the same, the reception desk where I'd started, the family photos on the wall, the company logo emblazoned everywhere. But there were changes too. New faces, updated systems, a general sense of order that hadn't existed before. Dad and Tyler were waiting in the conference room. Along with Melissa and the new CFO, we'd helped them hire a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia who had specialized in turning around struggling construction companies. Lauren, Dad nodded formally as I entered. Thank you for coming. The meeting began with Patricia's detailed presentation of their financial improvements. Delinquent accounts were down 36%. Cash flow had stabilized. They'd even secured 2 new major contracts that would significantly improve their position by year-end. The core issue remains the financing division, Patricia explained, pointing to the spreadsheets. We've contained the bleeding, but the fundamental model needs restructuring. Actually, Tyler interjected. I've been thinking about that. He glanced at me before continuing. We should probably shut it down completely. Return to our core competency construction. I couldn't hide my surprise. Tyler voluntarily suggesting they abandon his pet project, the division he'd fought so hard to control. That's quite a shift in position, I observed carefully. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. Yeah, well, it was never really my idea to begin with, was it? The acknowledgement hung in the air between us, the closest he'd ever come to admitting he'd stolen my concept. We've run the numbers, Patricia continued, seemingly unaware of the undercurrents. Phasing out the financing arm while focusing on construction would allow for debt reduction and stabilization within 18 months. After the formal presentations, Nathan engaged Patricia and Melissa in a technical discussion about debt restructuring options. Dad indicated he wanted to speak with me privately and led me to his office. It hadn't changed much, same imposing desk, same industry awards on the walls, same photo of him and Tyler at a job site. I noticed there were no pictures of me anywhere. You've done well for yourself, he said, gesturing for me to sit. Mitchell Financial Partners. I see the advertisements sometimes. Thank you, I replied simply. You've made good progress here too. He nodded, looking tired. Patricia's been a godsend. Should have hired someone like her years ago. Someone with financial expertise definitely helps, I agreed, wondering where this conversation was heading. Dad was silent for a moment, staring at his hands. That day you left. The things I said. I tensed, unsure if I was ready for this conversation. I was wrong, he continued, the words seeming difficult for him. About you being nothing without us. Clearly you've become something significant on your own. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was monumental. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said carefully. Your mother always said you had the sharpest mind in the family. I should have listened to her. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I should have listened to you. The admission stunned me. In all my imagined scenarios of reconciliation, I'd never actually expected him to admit his mistake so plainly. Why didn't you? I asked. The question that had haunted me for years finally spoken aloud. He sighed heavily. Stubbornness. Tradition. Fear, maybe. Fear of what? That you'd outshine us all, he admitted. That you'd make me obsolete. It was easier to keep you in a box I understood than to let you redefine what Mitchell could be. The honesty of his answer caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw my father not as the towering figure of my childhood, but as a man with his own insecurities and limitations. I never wanted to make anyone obsolete, I said softly. I just wanted my ideas to be heard, my contributions to be valued. I know that now. He gestured around the office. This loan agreement, as harsh as it is, it's saving us. You're saving the family business. Just not in the way I expected. We sat in silence for a moment, years of unspoken feelings filling the space between us. Lauren, he said finally, I'm not asking you to come back. You've built your own legacy now. But maybe there's room for some kind of relationship, professional or personal. Whatever you're comfortable with. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't even a proper apology for years of undervaluation. But it was a start and acknowledgement that I existed as my own person, worthy of respect on my own terms. I'd like that, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Maybe start with dinner sometime. Mom would like that. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. She would. She's very proud of you, you know. We all are now. As I left his office, I realized something important. I no longer needed their pride or approval. It was nice to have, certainly, but it no longer defined my worth. I had proven myself not to them, but to myself, and that made all the difference. The next 3 months brought continued improvement for Mitchell Construction. Under Patricia's guidance, they implemented all the financial controls from my original proposal 7 years late, but effective nonetheless. The loan payments were made on time, and their business stabilized. At the 6-month review, Nathan's team recommended reducing the interest rate to 18%, based on their improved risk profile still high, but a significant reduction that acknowledged their progress. My relationship with my family began a cautious thaw. Monthly dinners with Mom became a regular occurrence. Dad occasionally called with legitimate business questions. Even Tyler and I established a cordial if distant connection. One Thursday afternoon, Hannah knocked on my door with an unusual message. The Greater Metro Business Association called. They want to know if you'll accept their Family Business Innovation Award at next month's gala. Apparently, someone nominated you for your work with family business transitions. I was genuinely surprised. Did they say who nominated me? They wouldn't tell me, Hannah replied, just that it was someone who had witnessed your approach firsthand. I accepted the nomination, though public recognition had never been my goal. Jane was delighted, seeing it as valuable exposure for our growing division. This validates everything we've been building, she said. Recognition of your specialty in family business transitions will open more doors. The night of the gala arrived, and I found myself uncharacteristically nervous. Public speaking had never bothered me, but this award felt different, a public acknowledgement of the very expertise my own family had once dismissed. As I entered the hotel ballroom, Scanning the crowd for familiar faces, I froze. Near the front, at a prominent table, sat my parents and Tyler. They hadn't mentioned they would be attending. Before I could process the surprise, Melissa appeared at my side, elegant in a navy evening gown. "Did you know they were coming?" I whispered, nodding toward my family. She smiled mysteriously. "I might have suggested it would be appropriate." "Melissa?" I gave her a searching look. "Was it you? Did you nominate me for this award?" She shook her head. "Not me, though I would have if someone else hadn't beaten me to it." 2 weeks earlier, she had proudly shown me her newly completed CPA certification, the result of 3 years of night classes and weekend study sessions. Her determination had inspired me, just as she claimed my journey had inspired her. The mystery deepened. If not Melissa, then who? The ceremony proceeded with the usual speeches and presentations. Finally, the association president announced the Family Business Innovation Award. This year's recipient has pioneered a unique approach to family business transitions, recognizing that the challenges aren't merely financial but deeply personal. Through innovative assessment methods and compassionate yet firm interventions, she has helped numerous family businesses navigate succession and growth challenges. Please welcome Lauren Mitchell of Mitchell Financial Partners. As I made my way to the podium, the applause felt surreal. I delivered my prepared remarks, thanking Jane for her mentorship, Nathan for his partnership, and our clients for their trust. Family businesses are unique, I concluded. They operate at the intersection of commerce and emotion, where balance sheets meet birth certificates. Finding the path forward requires understanding both the financial and human elements at play. I'm honored to be recognized for this work, which is deeply meaningful to me personally. As I returned to my seat, I passed my family's table. Mom beamed with pride. Dad nodded with something like respect, and Tyler surprisingly stood to shake my hand. During the reception that followed, as I circulated through the crowd accepting congratulations, the association president approached with a smile. "I thought you might want to know who nominated you," she said. "It's unusual, but he gave permission to share his name after the ceremony." "Yes, I've been curious," I admitted. "It was a joint nomination," she explained. "Richard Mitchell began the process about 6 months ago, but it was incomplete. Then just last month, Melissa from your office submitted additional documentation that completed the nomination package." I couldn't hide my shock. "My father started the nomination?" "Yes, with quite a compelling letter about how your approach saved his company while preserving family relationships. He wrote that you exemplified the best qualities of business leadership by balancing financial rigor with understanding of family dynamics." It was clearly difficult for him to write. The letter went through several drafts. According to our committee, I thanked her mechanically, my mind reeling. My father, the man who once told me I'd be nothing without the family name, had begun the process of publicly recognizing my professional achievements. And he'd started it long before the loan was reduced, or relations had truly thawed. Later that evening, I found him alone by the bar, nursing a club soda. "You nominated me," I said simply, taking the seat beside him. He didn't deny it. "You deserved it. What you did for our company, it wasn't just a loan. It was a restructuring that saved us while letting us keep our dignity." "The terms were harsh," I reminded him. "They were fair," he countered. "Fair and necessary. That's what I finally understood." He turned to face me fully. "For years, I thought business was about power, who had it, who wielded it. What you showed me was that true business success comes from alignment, finding where value genuinely exists and nurturing it, even when it doesn't look like what you expected." Coming from my father, this was a profound shift in perspective. "The company's doing well now," he continued. "Tyler's thriving in operations, Patricia has the finances under control, and we've returned to what we do best. We're actually discussing expanding again the right way this time." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "The thing is, Lauren," he hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. "What you built, your own firm, your own approach, it's more impressive than anything I ever did with Mitchell Construction. You didn't just succeed. You innovated, created something new." The acknowledgement washed over me like a wave, healing places I hadn't realized were still raw. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "It means a lot coming from you." He nodded, looking slightly embarrassed by the emotional moment. "Well, your mother always said you'd surprise us all someday. Turns out she was right." As usual, we shared a genuine smile, perhaps the first in many years. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing between two worlds that no longer seemed entirely separate: the family that had shaped my beginnings and the career I had built despite their doubts. Both had contributed to who I had become. The 22% interest loan had been a business decision, not a personal vendetta, but it had catalyzed something unexpected, a recalibration of our family dynamic, based on mutual respect rather than predetermined roles. Sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like growth. Over the next few months, my division continued to expand. We hired 3 more analysts and opened a satellite office in the neighboring state. Nathan developed a sophisticated algorithm that improved our risk assessment model, allowing us to serve even more family businesses in transition. My relationship with my family settled into a new pattern: professional respect, with cautious personal reconnection. Mom and I had weekly lunches. Dad occasionally called to discuss industry trends. Tyler and I maintained a cordial distance. Our childhood rivalry transformed into something more like mutual acknowledgement of our different strengths. The loan to Mitchell Construction was being repaid on schedule, with the interest rate now reduced to 15% after another successful quarterly review. Their business had stabilized significantly, with Patricia implementing financial controls that should have been in place years ago. One Tuesday morning, Hannah interrupted my review of quarterly projections. "Your brother's here," she announced, looking surprised. "He doesn't have an appointment." Tyler rarely initiated contact, making this unexpected visit intriguing. "Send him in." He entered my office with uncharacteristic hesitation, his usual confidence subdued. "Got a minute? I need some advice." "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the visitor's chair. "What's on your mind?" He sat, fidgeting with his watch. "Dad's talking about retirement. Wants to announce it at the company's 35th anniversary party next month." This was news to me. I didn't realize he was considering stepping down. "Yeah, well," Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "That's why I'm here. He wants me to take over as CEO." The old Tyler would have announced this triumphantly. The fact that he seemed troubled by the prospect was interesting. "Isn't that what you've always wanted?" I asked carefully. "I thought so," he admitted. "It was always the plan, right? But after everything that's happened, the near bankruptcy, the loan, working with Patricia," he shook his head. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for the job." His candor surprised me. "What makes you say that?" "I'm good with clients, good on job sites, but the financial side, the strategic planning, that's never been my strength." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "That was always you." The acknowledgement so long in coming caught me off guard. "The thing is," he continued, "I don't want to screw it up, not after we've come so far. But Dad's set on keeping the company in the family." I began to see where this was heading. "And you're thinking—" I was thinking maybe we could work something out, some kind of partnership. The words seemed difficult for him. "You've got the financial expertise. I know the operations side. Between us, we cover all the bases." 7 years ago, this was all I had wanted: recognition of my value to the family business, a role that utilized my skills, a seat at the table. Now, I had built something of my own, something that reflected my vision and values. "Tyler," I said gently, "I appreciate the offer, but Mitchell Financial Partners is my primary focus now. I can't divide my attention." His face fell. "I understand, it was a long shot. But," I continued, "that doesn't mean we can't find another solution. Have you considered a different management structure? One that plays to your strengths while bringing in expertise where needed?" He looked intrigued. "What do you mean?" "A board structure. You as president, overseeing operations and client relationships. Patricia continuing as CFO with expanded authority. Maybe bringing Mom in officially for the design consulting she's been doing informally. Dad could transition to board chairman, still involved but not in day-to-day operations." Tyler considered this. "A family business that doesn't put all the pressure on one family member." "Exactly," I nodded. "Success doesn't have to look like Dad's version of it. You can create a structure that works for who you actually are, not who you think you should be." For the first time in our adult lives, Tyler looked at me with something like admiration. "You always could see the bigger picture." "It's what I do now," I reminded him. "Help family businesses find sustainable paths forward." "Would your firm—" He hesitated. "Would you personally consult on this transition? Help us set it up right?" It was a significant request, not just for professional assistance, but for personal involvement in the family's future. "I'd need to maintain professional boundaries," I cautioned. "Establish clear parameters about my role." "Of course," he agreed quickly. "We'd want this done properly, with contracts and everything." I smiled at his eagerness. "Then yes, I think I could help design a transition plan. As a consultant, not as a family member." Tyler's relief was palpable. "Thanks, Lauren. This means a lot." As he stood to leave, he paused awkwardly. I never properly apologized. "You know, for taking credit for your work, for letting Dad push you out." "No, you didn't," I agreed. I'm sorry, he said simply. I was insecure. Knew I couldn't measure up to you, so I took shortcuts. It wasn't right. The apology was 7 years late, but still meaningful. Thank you for saying that. Dad's anniversary party is 3 weeks from Saturday, he said, heading for the door. Mom would love if you came. Dad too, though he won't say it. I considered the invitation. I'll check my calendar. After Tyler left, I sat quietly, processing the conversation. The family business that had once rejected my contributions was now seeking my expertise. The brother who had taken credit for my work was now acknowledging my capabilities. It wasn't about validation anymore. I'd found that elsewhere. It was about reconciliation, finding a way forward that honored both where I'd come from and who I'd become. I picked up the phone and dialed Jane's number. Do we have a conflict of interest policy for consulting with family businesses where we also have a lending relationship? We can create one, she replied pragmatically. Why do you ask? I might have a new client, I said. One that needs a rather specialized approach to succession planning. 3 weeks later, I attended Mitchell Construction's 35th anniversary celebration. Not as the overlooked daughter or the stern creditor, but as something new, a respected professional whose expertise was valued by the very people who had once dismissed it. Dad announced his transition to chairman, with Tyler as president within the new management structure we designed together. As he outlined the changes coming to the company, he did something unprecedented. He publicly acknowledged my contribution. This new chapter of Mitchell Construction has been shaped with the expert guidance of my daughter Lauren, whose financial acumen once saved this company, and whose vision will help carry it forward. In that moment, standing among people who had witnessed my journey from administrative assistant to respected financial expert, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph over my father's admission, but freedom from needing it at all. I had already proven my worth to myself and to the world. His recognition was welcome, but no longer necessary for my sense of self. That was the real victory. If you've ever had to rebuild a relationship that once hurt you, drop a in the comments. The journey to healing is rarely straightforward. 1 year after my father's retirement announcement, Mitchell Construction was thriving under its new management structure. Tyler had grown into his role as president, focusing on operations and client relationships, areas where he genuinely excelled. Patricia continued as CFO, implementing the financial controls I had designed years earlier. Even my mother had found her place, heading a new interior design division that complemented their construction services. The loan had been paid in full 6 months ahead of schedule, officially ending our financial relationship. Mitchell Financial Partners had continued its growth, with our family business transition specialty now recognized throughout the industry. We'd expanded to 28 employees across 3 offices, with Nathan leading our analytical team and Melissa joining us as a senior financial advisor after completing her CPA certification. Our firm was valued at $1.4 million, modest in the financial world, but a significant achievement for a specialized boutique operation built from scratch in just a few years. We managed a loan portfolio of $5.6 million, focusing on quality over quantity in our specialized niche. On a crisp autumn morning, I sat in my office reviewing our quarterly performance when Hannah announced an unexpected visitor. "Your father's here," she said. "Says he needs just a few minutes." Since our relationship had normalized, Dad rarely showed up unannounced. "Send him in." He entered looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Retirement suited him. He'd lost the perpetual tension that once defined his posture, and even dressed more casually in khakis and a button-down, rather than his trademark suit. "Lauren," he nodded, taking a seat. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just quarterly reviews," I assured him. "What brings you by?" He placed a small wooden box on my desk. "Found this while cleaning out some old files at home. Thought you might want it." Curious, I opened the box to find a collection of childish drawings, blueprints, and building designs sketched in crayon. Some on construction paper, others on the backs of Mitchell Construction letterhead. My childhood drawings from when Dad used to take me to job sites. "You kept these?" I asked, surprised. Dad had never been sentimental. "Your mother did at first," he admitted, "but I'm the one who put them in the box. Always meant to show them to you when you took your place in the company." I lifted a particularly detailed drawing, my 10-year-old vision of an office building with a playground on the roof. "I remember this one. You said it was impractical but creative." "Still true," he chuckled. "Though these days, rooftop amenities are all the rage. You were ahead of your time." We sat in comfortable silence as I looked through the drawings, each one a snapshot of a time when I believed my ideas mattered to him. "I made a lot of mistakes with you, Lauren," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Let my own limitations narrow my vision of what you could be. It worked out in the end, I replied, surprised to find I truly meant it. I found my own path. You did. He nodded. A better one than I could have offered you. But I still regret the years we lost. The simple acknowledgement meant more than any elaborate apology could have. The company's doing well under the new structure, he continued. Tyler calls it the Mitchell model, when he talks to other family businesses, equal roles based on actual strengths rather than birth order or gender. I smiled at that. Progress. He's recommending some of them to your firm, you know. Says you're the best in the business at helping families through transitions. This was news to me. I didn't realize he was sending referrals. 3 so far, Dad confirmed. Says if you helped the Mitchells, you can help anyone. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Your mother and I have been talking, he continued, shifting slightly in his chair. We're hosting a holiday dinner next month. Family, close friends, key employees. We'd like you to come not just as our daughter, but as a respected colleague, someone who helped shape Mitchell Construction's future. The invitation represented a full-circle acknowledgement not just of our blood connection, but of my professional value to the family legacy. I'd like that, I said sincerely. As Dad stood to leave, he paused, looking around my office with appreciation rather than the assessment I'd seen in his eyes during his first visit years ago. You built something remarkable here, Lauren. Something uniquely yours. His voice carried genuine admiration. When the Mitchell name means something different because of you, something more than just construction. That's a legacy in itself. After he left, I sat with the box of childhood drawings, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the overlooked daughter to the stern creditor, to something new, a professional whose worth was recognized on her own terms. The 22% interest loan had never been about revenge. It had been about business-appropriate terms for a high-risk investment. But it had catalyzed something more valuable than financial recovery. It had forced a reckoning, a reassessment of long-held assumptions about value and contribution. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Meeting in 5 minutes to discuss the Addams family transition proposal? I smiled, returning the drawings to their box. The past had its place, but my focus remained on the future, helping other families navigate their own transitions, with the insight that only someone who had lived both sides of the equation could offer. That evening, I met Melissa for our regular Tuesday dinner. Over the years, she had evolved from a sympathetic colleague to a trusted friend to a valued team member at Mitchell Financial Partners. So your father finally gave you those drawings, she observed, sipping her wine. He mentioned finding them months ago. You knew about them? She smiled. I might have helped him locate the box when he was cleaning out his office. Suggested it might be meaningful to you. Always the facilitator, I teased. First the award nomination, now this. Actually, she admitted, the award nomination was all him. I just helped complete the paperwork when he got stuck on the formal requirements. I shook my head, still amazed by how much had changed. Did you ever imagine, back when we were having lunch in that sad break room, that we'd end up here? Not specifically here, she acknowledged. But I always knew you were meant for more than what they allowed you to be. That's why I pushed you to apply for that MBA program. Best advice I ever took, I said, raising my glass in a toast. To finding our own paths. And to redefining family business, she added, clinking her glass against mine. Later that night, as I looked out over the city from my apartment window, I reflected on the words I would never hear directly from my father, but which his actions had finally acknowledged. That I had value independent of the family name, that my contributions mattered, that my vision had merit. More importantly, I reflected on the truth I had discovered for myself, that my worth had never depended on his recognition in the first place. To everyone watching who's ever been underestimated by those who should have believed in you most, remember this. Sometimes the greatest success isn't proving others wrong. It's building something so undeniably right that it speaks for itself. Your value isn't determined by those who fail to see it. It's established by your courage to believe in it anyway. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories of transformation and justice. And remember, the best revenge isn't serving back the same pain you received. It's creating a life so full of purpose that the pain becomes just one chapter in a much larger story of success.